"I'm too fat to be wanted," she whispered. The giant rancher said, "Then I'm the only one who wants you." Dry Hollow, Wyoming Territory, Saturday morning, 1883. The air in Dry Hollow carried the smell of dust, hay, and hot bread. Wagons creaked past the church road, and merchants shouted prices for beans and flour. Beneath the bright autumn sun, the whole town seemed alive. Everyone except the woman standing alone beside the general store. Her name was Tally Whitlow, 23 years old, round as the harvest moon, and just as gentle. Her dress, simple gray cotton, strained slightly at the seams, and the ribbon around her waist tied in a bow that barely reached. Her cheeks were full, soft with color, and when she bent to adjust her shoes, her shadow looked wide enough to cover the step beside her. But her eyes, calm, brown, and thoughtful, had the patience of someone used to reading small print and swallowing big hurts. She carried a wicker basket filled with ink bottles, folded parchment, and a few handwritten signs offering her service. Letters written, accounts kept, reading and writing lessons, quiet, honest work. She had come to the Saturday market to find her first client. She'd spent half the night rehearsing polite words, how to sound firm without sounding proud. "Good morning," she said, her voice careful but kind, to the shopkeeper arranging apples. "I can read contracts and write letters for folks who need. My rates are fair." The man didn't even look up at first. When he finally did, his mouth twisted into a grin. "Well now," he said loud enough for others to hear, "ain't that something? What can a girl your size write besides a menu?" Laughter rippled from a nearby stall. A woman selling ribbons chimed in. "Maybe she could write recipes. Lord knows she's tried a few." Tally's grip on her basket tightened. "I studied with the Sisters of St. Agnes," she said quietly. "I can read land deeds, tax ledgers, freight manifests." The shopkeeper snorted. "Tax ledgers? Sweetheart, you'd break the desk before you balance it." The laughter grew meaner. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Look at her, bless her heart, trying to sell words when she should be selling pies." Tally turned to leave, blinking fast, but a passing man's shoulder knocked into hers. Her basket tipped, ink bottle shattering on the ground. Bread, parchment, and carrots spilled into the dirt. She bent down quickly, skirts pulling tight at her knees, trying to gather her things. Her face burned hot as a forge. The laughter stung harder than the fall. "Watch your step," someone called out mockingly. She made the ground shake. Another answered. The sound of it cracked something inside her. Her hands trembled. She whispered to no one, don't look at me." And then a large shadow blocked the sun. "Ma'am," a deep voice said above her. "Steady and low, are you hurt?" Tally looked up, and for a heartbeat, forgot to breathe. The man towering over her looked carved from mountain stone, tall, broad, with shoulders that filled his shirt and arms that seemed made to lift oxen. His hat shaded a stern brow and gray eyes that didn't mock her, didn't pity her, just saw her. Behind him stood 3 children, a boy about 6, watching warily, a smaller boy gripping the man's coat, and a little girl, barely 2, clutching a rag doll. He reached out a calloused hand. "Let me help you." Tally hesitated. People were still watching, but his voice left no room for shame, only steadiness. She placed her small, round hand in his. His palm swallowed hers easily. He lifted her with such care that her feet found the ground before she realized he'd done it. The man bent down to pick up one of her crumpled flyers. His rough fingers smoothed the page. He read every line. "You truly know how to teach letters?" he asked. "I need someone to teach my children, and to keep my ranch accounts." The crowd hushed. Even the laughter died off. Tally swallowed, her voice barely audible. "Yes, I can do that." But the humiliation still clung to her. She kept her eyes down, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't need your pity," she whispered. Then, softer, broken, "I'm too fat to be wanted." The man stepped closer, until she could feel the warmth from his chest, his shadow covering her completely. He leaned down so only she could hear. "Then I'm the only one who wants you." And in that single breath, the whole market seemed to forget how to laugh. The Ridge Hollow Ranch sat at the far edge of Dry Hollow, nestled between a slow creek and a long spine of hills that rolled like sleeping buffalo. It was a stretch of land as wide as sky and twice as silent. The buckboard wagon rattled along the dirt road, pulled by two aging horses and driven by a man who spoke almost nothing. Harlan Ridge, 34, widower, rancher, and the sort of man the town never truly understood. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, revealing arms thick with muscle, the kind earned from work, not show. His jaw was dark with stubble, his brow furrowed in thought, and his eyes stayed forward, on the road, like he trusted it more than people. Beside him in the wagon bed sat Tally Whitlow, hands folded around the straps of her bag. The wooden seat creaked under her weight, but she sat upright, spine straight despite the growing ache in her lower back. 3 children sat across from her. Elias, the eldest at 6, guarded and quiet. Micah, 4, fidgeting with a piece of twine, and little Suki, 2 years old, her thumb in her mouth, eyes round and unblinking. No one spoke. When they reached the ranch house, Harlan climbed down and offered Tally a hand. She took it hesitantly, surprised again by how easily he lifted her down like she weighed no more than his tool bag. The house stood large and weather-worn, but not neglected. A porch ran the full length, its steps groaning under each boot. "This way," he said. He led her into a side room just off the kitchen, clean, simple, with a narrow bed, desk, and small bookshelf. "You'll take your meals here or with the children. Chores start at first light. Lessons after breakfast, ledgers after that." Tally nodded. "I'll show you the ranch books tonight," he added. "They've been a mess since my wife." He didn't finish the sentence, just turned and left the room with quiet steps that somehow still shook the floor. Tally placed her bag on the desk and took a moment to exhale. She could still feel the weight of the townsfolk's laughter from earlier, but here, on this land, everything was quieter. There was room to breathe. Later that morning, she was brought to the main sitting room where the children waited. Elias sat on a bench like a miniature version of his father, arms folded, brows low. Micah was lying upside down across the rug, and Suki stood near the window, silently watching the chickens outside. No introductions were made. Tally sat on the floor. Not on the bench, not on the chair, right there on the braided rug, skirts billowing around her like a soft gray sea. The boys glanced at each other. "I brought something," she said. From her satchel, she pulled out a small, hand-stitched book. The cover was soft leather, faded, with edges worn from use. She opened it to the first page. "It's called The Goose Who Forgot How to Honk," she said. Micah turned over. Elias leaned, but didn't move closer. Suki didn't turn at all. This goose couldn't honk, not even once, not even to warn his friends. So the other geese said he was useless. But what they didn't know was... She flipped the page to a simple drawing of the goose, flying in front of a storm cloud. He could still fly, better than all of them. By the 4th page, Micah was scooting closer. By the 6th, Elias was leaning in, one brow lifted. By the 8th, Suki sat down beside Tally, quietly, wordlessly, and rested her head against the woman's soft upper arm. Tally kept reading, not pausing, not reacting. She only smiled, just a little, as her voice warmed into the story's final line. Outside the window, Harlan leaned against the porch post, arms crossed. He watched the children, watched Tally's gentle presence hold them like a quiet storm, and something deep in his chest shifted, something he hadn't let move in a long, long time. By the 2nd week, Tally Whitlow knew the rhythm of Ridge Hollow, like she knew the ink lines of her own palm. The children no longer watched her like a stranger. Elias now read aloud each morning with a quiet determination. Micah had stopped throwing rocks at the chicken coop, and Suki, soft, silent Suki, had learned to smile. That smile came the day Tally set 2 honey butter biscuits on the table and said, "You can have the second one if you say one word." The little girl had stared at the biscuit, eyes round as coins. "Mama," she whispered. Tally hadn't breathed for a full second. Then, blinking back tears, she pushed the second biscuit closer without a word. Harlan Ridge had seen it from the doorway. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, turned, and walked back out into the sun. He was always watching. Not with suspicion, but with the quiet gaze of someone who measured things by weight and worth. Tally would catch him sometimes, lingering at the edge of the porch as she taught Elias the difference between there and there, or when she cleaned the chalkboard in the small schoolroom. Once, she glanced out the kitchen window to find him tightening a hinge on the gate she'd mentioned, squeaked, though she'd never asked him to fix it. He never offered praise, never said thank you. But she noticed how, after she coughed for 2 days, a tin of lemon honey appeared beside her cup. Harlan Ridge did not speak much, but he listened. He noticed. And Tally noticed him too. The way his shoulders shifted when he lifted a hay bale without effort. The quiet command in his voice when a colt refused the bridle. The way he took his coffee black but always stirred it 3 times before drinking. And how, once, when it rained, he was the only one who thought to climb the ladder and nail down the loose corner of the roof before the storm hit. He worked with sleeves rolled high and his broad back bent low, while thunder cracked and wind tore at the boards. Tally had watched from the window, heart tight. That man, she thought, does not know he's still building a house, for someone. It was during one cool morning, when the firewood stack had run low, that Tally tried to carry a woven basket full of chopped kindling across the yard. It was heavier than she expected. The handles bit into her palms. She took one step, then another, knees trembling. Her foot caught the edge of a stone. She stumbled. A sharp breath left her lips. The basket tilted. And a strong arm caught her, just under the elbow. Her face landed against a chest broad as a barn door, warm and steady. One of the kindling sticks slipped to the ground. Harlan's other hand righted the basket with a single motion. "You all right?" he asked. Tally looked up, and their eyes met for the first time, really met. His were a pale storm gray, and they didn't flinch from hers. Her cheeks went hot. She nodded. I just misjudged the weight," she said. "You're carrying more than most do," he said simply. His voice was rough, but there was no mockery in it. They stood that way for half a breath longer than necessary. Then both stepped back at the same time, awkward, silent, pretending nothing had happened. Harlan cleared his throat. "Next time, ask Elias to help. He's strong enough." Tally nodded. "Of course." He turned and walked back toward the barn, boots crunching softly on gravel. She stood for a moment longer, heart pounding like hooves on dirt. Then she gathered the scattered stick of kindling, held the basket tighter, and walked toward the house. Neither of them looked back, but neither of them forgot. The storm rolled in fast, without warning, thunder low like growling wolves, lightning splitting the night sky over Ridge Hollow. Rain came heavy and hard. Wind slammed shutters against the walls. Somewhere near midnight, a deafening crack split the sky, followed by a roar that was not thunder. Then came the smell, sharp, acrid, undeniable, smoke. Elias was the first to rise, eyes wide with panic. Micah tumbled from his bed, already crying. Suki sat up, dazed, mouth open but soundless. Tally threw open the window. The horse barn was on fire. Flames licked the black sky, wild and angry. The lightning had struck the roof clean through. From the porch, Harlan burst into view, barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, soaked already from the rain. He didn't hesitate. He ran. Tally watched him charge straight toward the blaze like a man possessed. "Get the children to the cellar," he bellowed back once, voice ragged. "Now." The cellar door was under the kitchen floor. Tally lit a lantern with trembling hands, guided the children down the narrow stairs, and wrapped them in blankets kept for winter. Micah sobbed into her skirt. Elias sat stiff, fists clenched. But it was Suki who worried Tally most. She couldn't cry, couldn't speak. Her tiny chest heaved with shallow, gasping breaths. "Suki," Tally said, kneeling beside her. "Breathe with me. In, out. In. But the little girl's eyes fluttered, her lips turned pale. Tally's heart seized. The child had medicine, a small vial of drops the doctor had given for breathing fits, but it was in her travel bag. Which was still in the barn. She didn't think. She grabbed the lantern and lifted Suki into her arms. The rain hit her like stones as she burst into the night, skirts heavy, boots sinking in mud. The barn crackled ahead, orange light swallowing everything. "Harlan!" she screamed into the wind. "Where is my bag?" He didn't hear her. He was inside the burning barn, cutting loose the last terrified horse, smoke curling around him like some unholy shroud. Tally scanned the fence rail. There, her bag, slumped near the tack room door, wet but intact. She ran. Lightning flashed, her boots slipped. The ground trembled as a beam groaned above. Just as she reached the saddle hook, a heavy timber, half burned, broke loose from the rafters. She froze. A blur of movement slammed into her from the side, a wall of muscle, a grunt. "Harlan!" He wrapped one arm around her shoulders, shielding her body with his own, as the flaming beam hit his back and bounced to the dirt beside them. He barely flinched. The rain hissed against the embers. Tally looked up, gasping. His eyes were wild, but locked only on her. "You all right?" he rasped. She nodded, shaking. "The baby, she can't breathe." He took the bag from her hand, shoved it against her chest. "Go." She turned and ran, Suki still in her arms, heart pounding louder than the fire behind her. Back in the cellar, she gave the girl the drops. Suki's breathing steadied, slow and shuddering, until she lay curled against her brothers again, safe. It wasn't until dawn that the flames died. Neighbors from the edge of town arrived, soaked and shocked. Word had spread, Ridge Hollow was burning. They found Tally, soaked to the bone, still kneeling beside the children. And they saw Harlan, his shirt scorched, back raw from where the beam struck, standing over her with one arm around her shoulders, not as a man shielding a servant, but as someone who feared the world might take her away. Not a word was spoken. Even the townsfolk, who once mocked her, stood still. There, in the pale gray of morning, surrounded by ash and rain, a fat woman cradled a sick child, and the biggest man in the county held her like she was made of glass. And that image would stay in their minds far longer than any fire. The morning after the fire, Ridge Hollow stood beneath a sky scrubbed clean by rain and smoke. Blackened beams smoldered in the barnyard, and townsfolk, some out of concern, others out of curiosity, drifted in and out offering help or just watching. But what spread faster than the flames had ever reached were the words. They whispered across dry goods counters and back porch fences, words not spoken to faces, but behind backs, like cowards do. Harlan Ridge ran into fire for that fat girl? He's lost his mind since his wife died. He always did like big women, heard she reminds him of his late missus. She's got him wrapped, probably wants the ranch, or to play mama for the inheritance. Tally didn't hear the worst of it until she went into town 3 days later to replace her broken ink jar. She only meant to be in and out, her list tucked neatly in her hand. She was standing near the stationery aisle when 2 women passed behind her. "She's still up there, can you believe that?" She must be after the land. No man brings a woman into his house that fast unless he's blind with grief or dumb with lust. Tally froze. One of them laughed, high-pitched and sharp. "Poor kids. That big thing's stomping around the house. Lord help 'em if she sits on one by accident." Her hands clenched around the list. She left the store without buying a single thing. By sundown, she had packed most of her things in silence. The children were asleep, their small breathing steady in the next room. She moved through the house like a ghost, folding dresses, tucking away the books she'd read aloud every night, rolling up the chalkboard slates Elias loved. When she reached for her picture book, the one Suki always asked for, her hand trembled. She pulled it back. No, she thought, better not. Someone else could read to them. Someone the town wouldn't laugh at. She glanced out the window. Harlan was in the barn, shoulders moving slow and steady as he replaced the last support beam. Rain had soaked his shirt to his back, but he kept working like he didn't know how to stop. She reached the front door. The floor creaked. He turned from the barn as if he'd heard it, then saw the figure in the lamplight, her satchel at her side, hand on the latch. He crossed the yard in long strides, boots heavy in the mud. When he stepped inside, he didn't slam the door. He just looked at her, quiet. "Where are you going?" She didn't turn. "I think it's time I left." "Why?" "Because I don't want your children growing up hearing what I heard today." She spoke calmly, but her voice trembled near the end. "Tally." She turned to face him now, eyes full, mouth shaking. "They're saying I remind you of your dead wife, that I'm using your grief to make myself useful, that I'm forcing myself into your home, into their lives, because no one else would have me. They're wrong." "I know that." Her voice cracked. "But it doesn't matter." He stepped forward, close enough to touch. She stepped back. "I'm not ashamed of how I look, Harlan. Not anymore. But I won't be the reason your children hear their classmates whisper, 'There goes the fat woman and her stepkids.' I won't let them grow up thinking their father's settled." "You think that's what I did?" I think you're too good. And they'll twist that into something shameful." Tears broke loose, silent and hot. "You're too good, Harlan. But I can't stay and let your children be called the stepkids of the fat woman." She looked away. "I'd rather leave before they learn what it means to be ashamed of loving someone like me." She reached for the doorknob, but his hand closed gently over hers. She didn't pull away. He didn't speak. He just stood there, both of them breathing in the same silence, neither knowing what to say that wouldn't break them further. The morning light crept through the kitchen window, soft and gold, settling like dust over Ridge Hollow. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the children, who usually stirred at first light, stayed curled beneath their quilts. On the dining table sat a folded piece of paper. Tally nearly missed it when she stepped inside to leave her room key. Her hands hesitated. The paper was thick, cream-colored, the kind used for contracts. Ink smudged in the corner, unfinished. She glanced toward the porch. No sign of Harlan. No sound of boots or the creak of floorboards. Just the letter. She sat. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded it. His handwriting was careful. Not perfect, but strong. Like him. "Miss Whitlow, Tally. I am not a man good with words. I leave those to you. But I find I need to put this down before I lose the nerve to say it aloud. I know you heard what they said. I know it cut you. And I know you think leaving is a kindness. But I have known loss. I buried a woman I loved. I buried the part of me that believed in softness, in quiet mornings, in warm food on the stove. Then you came. You didn't ask to be seen, but I saw you anyway. The way you speak to my children like they matter. The way you listen without interrupting. The way you never once ask me to be anything more than what I am. And I realized something I never thought I'd want again. I want a partner, not just for the ranch, for the road ahead, not a wife with perfect curves or a quiet reputation. I want someone strong enough to carry 3 children in her arms, warm enough to chase out the cold that's lived in this house since the day she left. I want someone who looks like home. I was going to ask you to stay. I still will. But only if you want to be here. Only if you know that when I say I. Here, the ink trailed off. No signature, no final word. Just a single stroke and a blot, as if the pen had paused too long and the heart behind it had gone quiet. Tally stared at the page. She didn't move. For a long, aching moment, she let the words wash over her, slowly, carefully, line by line. Then the tears came. Not the hot, shameful kind. These were quieter, softer, the kind that came not from pain, but from something finally opening inside her, a door long sealed shut. She pressed her palm to the paper, as if trying to feel the warmth still lingering in his handwriting. And for the first time in her life, she believed it, that someone could want her. Not in spite of her, but because of her. She closed her eyes, smiling through tears that wouldn't stop. Her shoulders shook once, just once, as if shedding the last of a burden she never asked to carry. Then she stood, folded the letter carefully, and held it close to her chest. Because maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done staying after all. The morning sun was already high by the time Harlan and Tally found themselves, side by side, beneath the half-repaired chicken coop. The storm weeks ago had torn part of the roof away, and though the fire had drawn most of the ranch hands elsewhere, the coop remained on the list of forgotten repairs. Harlan held the planks steady while Tally hammered in the nails, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair pinned back under a simple scarf. They worked in quiet rhythm, no talk, no glances, just the kind of silence that meant something had settled between them. When she paused to catch her breath, he handed her a cup of water. "You're putting it on straighter than I ever did," he said. She smiled, faint and soft. "I don't know about that, but crookeds never scared me." He nodded once, leaning his weight against the beam, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Then, without looking at her, his voice came low and rough. "If you keep teaching the children." He paused, the words thick in his throat. Then he turned, met her eyes. "Then I'll learn how to be a husband to you." She froze, the hammer still in her hand. Her breath caught, not because it was sudden, it wasn't, but because it was simple. No kneeling, no ring, no grand speech. Just the plain truth, offered like everything else he gave her, solid, steady, real. She blinked, heart beating fast. "You mean that?" "I don't say what I don't mean." A moment passed. Then the chicken coop door creaked open. "Are you getting married?" Micah shouted, eyes wide. Elias came next, half pretending he didn't care, but his ears were pink, and little Suki waddled up behind them, arms outstretched, her doll dragging in the dirt. "Will you be our mother?" Micah asked, all at once, like it had burst out of him. Tally crouched to meet their gaze, her hand brushing Suki's cheek. She looked at Elias, who finally nodded, just once, like his father. "I'd be honored," she whispered. They all tackled her in a clumsy, giggling embrace, dirt and love, and too many arms at once. Word spread fast. That Saturday, the church bell rang without being pulled. Folks gathered not because they were invited, but because they were curious. "She's really doing it?" someone whispered. "Marrying the big man?" "Thought she ran off," another muttered. "Guess he ran faster." Tally stood outside the chapel in a dress that didn't hug her waist or hide her arms. It was sky blue, soft and worn at the edges, a dress no one had expected her to wear, least of all Harlan. It had been his wife's. She'd found it folded in a cedar chest, with a note written in the same shaky hand Tally had come to recognize. "For whoever makes this house feel whole again." She wore it like a second skin, no corset, no frills, just truth. And when she walked down the chapel path with 3 children clinging to her skirt, no one laughed, no one dared. Harlan stood waiting in a plain shirt, sleeves rolled, hands clasped in front of him. When she reached him, he didn't take her hand first. He bowed his head, then lifted her hand slowly, gently, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, like she was made of something rare. No vows, no crowd-pleasing promises, just this. And in that silence, Dry Hollow finally understood this was not a joke, not a pity act, not a compromise. This was a man and a woman who had found one another in the ashes and chose to stay. 1 year passed. The land around Ridge Hollow turned gold again, then green, then gold once more. Seasons came and went, but one thing remained: the sound of children's laughter ringing through the hills. Tally stood at the front of a one-room schoolhouse, built from the old barnwood Harlan had saved. The blackboard bore her careful chalk script. Desks lined the room, filled with children from ranches, from town, from the orphanage across the valley. Some of them had been the same children who once whispered behind her back. They didn't whisper anymore. Now, they raised their hands. They asked her to read just one more story. They asked her what metaphor meant and how to spell hope. Tally taught them not just letters, but how to see the weight and warmth in their own words. In the evenings, the Ridge home glowed with soft lamplight. The smell of stew and fresh biscuits lingered through the halls. Elias helped with fence work. Micah tried to train the goats, unsuccessfully, and little Suki, now speaking in full, sweet sentences, sat curled in her father's lap while he sounded out words from a picture book. Harlan Ridge, once silent and rough with language, now read aloud with the same quiet care he used to mend fences and steady horses. Tally had taught him how. She never pushed, never rushed. She simply placed a book in his hands one night and said, "You already built this house. You can build your words, too." And he did. Not perfectly, but slowly. One syllable at a time. He read to Suki every night, the words slow but steady, his arm around her small frame as she drifted to sleep. And after the house fell silent, after the wind died down, he would find Tally on the porch. She always waited for him there. Sometimes they didn't speak. They didn't need to. They sat side by side, their bodies broad and solid, like two old trees that had grown tall in different places, then finally leaned together. Her hand would always find his, and his fingers would always close around hers. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And she let him, because now, finally, she believed that she could be wanted. In Ridge Hollow, folks still talked, but the tone had changed. They said, "That schoolteacher's the smartest soul in town." They said, "Harlan Ridge smiles more than he ever did." They said, "Funny how love finds people, not the pretty ones, or the perfect ones, but the ones who stay when no one's watching." And if you rode past the ranch around sunset, you'd sometimes see them, Harlan and Tally, seated on the porch, shoulders brushing, watching the sky burn orange over the hills. Neither of them said much, but their hands were always folded together, because in that place, love didn't need words, it just needed a little room, and someone strong enough to hold it. Thank you for riding with us through this quiet, powerful love story, where words healed, hands held, and hearts found a home beyond judgment and shame. If this story moved you, if it made you smile, tear up, or believe just a little more in the kind of love that sees beyond skin and scars, hit that like button to let us know you were here. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of forbidden glances, untamed hearts, and love that defies bullets, borders, and time. And remember, out here in the West, where the land is wild and the rules are few, love still finds a way. See you on the next ride.